Hello, everyone. Good evening. MikesMMAPicks here, checking in with you on this late Sunday as we take a brief look back at all that was UFC Vegas 70. 10 fights on the card, 6 ended via finish. And wanted to take a few moments to take a trip down memory lane. Hope everybody's doing great this evening. James, welcome. Thanks for tuning in. Hope everybody's enjoying their Sunday so far. So the first fight of the night, where we saw a lightweight matchup between an undefeated fighter and Nurullo Aliyev, fighting out of Tajikistan, taking on Rafael Alves. Rafael Alves was a fighter who we knew was very explosive. The controversial part of that fight that took place was when it appeared as though Rafael Alves was attempting to fishhook Aliyev and Aliyev ended up clamping down on Alves, and there was a suspected bite mark, etc. So shockingly, a point was deducted in that spot. I was not expecting that to happen. I think Mark Smith was the referee there, and got to get on him a little bit there. I don't think that was the right call. I don't think a point should have been deducted there. Aliyev had a dominant position, and Alves basically stuck his finger in Aliyev's mouth. So point was deducted, and in the grand scheme of things, it didn't mean much because Aliyev's dominant grappling was on full display. And Alves, besides attempting a guillotine, ran out of gas, as he usually does, and I believe that was his 12th loss on his professional record. So how nice was it when we saw the crowd? There was a panning of a crowd in Tajikistan where you had an entire stadium filled with fans. Very, very impressive. So glad that Aliyev got the victory there and was able to see what was going on in his home country. I expect that there will be a parade of sorts. Next fight up, we had Joe Solecki taking on Carl Deaton. Carl Deaton was grounded early and had no answer for the body lock and the back-taking ability of Joe Solecki. Joe Solecki, extremely dominant throughout the entirety of the bout. Props to Carl Deaton for his hand fighting. He was hand fighting, trying to save his life out there, ended up succumbing to, I believe, the rear naked choke of Joe Solecki and was rendered unconscious. So we had a free bet that I put out that the Solecki-Deaton fight was not going to go the distance, I believe at minus 168. That ended up cashing. That was a one-unit play. And Solecki, he was throwing hands early, was getting the better of Deaton. I don't really trust Solecki on the feet. Anything that he does, he seems like he's very robotic in nature. And he's there to be hit. We saw against De Silva was a deer in the headlights at times on the feet. He wanted that fight on the mat. And if he's on the bottom, we saw against Jared Gordon, that's a liability for Solecki. So Deaton, I think this might be one and done for him. He's in his mid-30s, was in the PFL down at 145 pounds. I know he had a rough cut for this one, but not too thrilled with Deaton's performance. Also, he avoided the handshake at the weigh-ins. That's something that put a little stock into. If you want to talk about upping the animosity headed into a bout, no reason not to shake your opponent's hand if they put their hand out as a gesture of goodwill and solidarity amongst men. Carl Deaton leaves the UFC, and Joe Solecki gets another submission victory. I believe that's his, sixth or seventh UFC fight that Selecki's had. So he's starting to rack him up here. And not sure if he was on the receiving end of a bonus last night. Somebody in the comments section could let me know if Selecki won a bonus. Fun fight, though. Actually had me sweating a little bit there towards the end of the second round when Selecki was struggling to lock in that rear naked choke. Tried to get it under the chin for extended periods of time and eventually got it. So we cashed that ticket. Solid fight, though. Solid fight. Hello, Six Side. Welcome. Nicholas, hope you're having a fantastic evening wherever you are. PBL, Professional Biters League. Good question. I don't know, man. I don't know. You never know what's going to happen. I'm not a big fan of the slap fighting, though. It's interesting how the same referees that we see inside of the octagon are in this slap fighting league. It just I'll just leave it at that. I'm not the biggest fan. I'm also not a big fan of the celebrity boxing matchup that filled some of my timeline today while I was scrolling through Twitter. I muted that and got that the hell out of there, because if we are going to watch fights, at least let's watch some higher caliber fights. I had the privilege and honor of attending Manny Pacquiao versus Miguel Cotto back in, I believe that was 2008, 2009 maybe, at MGM in Las Vegas. And the sport has fallen off dramatically since then. So I did not watch that celebrity boxing matchup earlier today, but I did watch a glorified flyweight matchup. It was actually a catchweight bout yesterday between Ode Osbourne and Charles Johnson. I stressed in my tweet yesterday, if I was able to talk anybody off of playing Charles Johnson, then I did my job. Charles Johnson flew all the way from Thailand. We knew that he was taking this fight on very short notice. The jet lag, I saw in a tweet today that he blamed his loss on being extremely tired and taking the fight on short notice. And I also watched the third round. You watched Charles Johnson jumping guillotine multiple times, failing. And that is where the fight really hung in the balance there. And also the first round, Ode Osbourne getting off on those, the kicks. He hasn't thrown many kicks in his UFC career, but did yesterday evening and was really did a number on Charles Johnson. Split decision victory for Ode Osbourne. Osbourne was the pick yesterday, and I'm not a believer in Charles Johnson's abilities at this level, climbing the ladder. I mentioned yesterday that he is a stationary target when he's trading in the pocket, and that was evident there throughout multiple minutes of the fight. Once he got going, you saw him basically trying to wake himself up after the first round, after he took that loss in the first round. Came back. I know he ended up having a slam there, I believe, at near the end of the first round, but that wasn't enough to have him win that round. So Charles Johnson takes the loss, and it does a little bit of a number to his trajectory. Let's be honest here. This is somebody who was ragdolled by Makayev, who was a youngster, and now he loses to Ode Osbourne, who's nothing really to write home about in the flyweight division. So Ode Osbourne gets the victory. Let's see. How long can you tolerate your opponent's bite? Good question. Well, we've seen the likes of Evander Holyfield and Michael Tyson run into some issues there. We saw what happened there. Hopefully we don't have that happen again in the octagon. By the way, we saw some twerking in the octagon yesterday. Jordan Leavitt defeating Victor Martinez via TKO. Not many people expected Jordan Leavitt to win this fight via TKO. By the way, if you have the opportunity, take a watch of his of Jordan Leavitt's post-fight interview outside of the octagon when he was doing media. He really shed some light on some of the history that he's had outside of the octagon and how much this victory meant to him. So happy for Jordan Leavitt, one of the most interesting fighters on the UFC roster. He's a unique individual, I will say that. So Jordan Leavitt gets the victory. Victor Martinez, you got to wonder how he feels knowing that he was brutally TKO'd by Jordan Leavitt. And Leavitt was as surprised as anybody inside of that Apex yesterday. So the pick yesterday was Jordan Leavitt to defeat Victor Martinez. I know Martinez has had issues, a propensity to give up his back multiple times in many of his fights. And if he's able to outlast his opponents, he can pour it on them. But he didn't get that opportunity and got caught, I believe, with a knee up the middle at one point by Leavitt. And then Leavitt gets the victory. So happy for Jordan Leavitt. I saw someone on Twitter, I think it was Magic or somebody, tweeted that Alex Hernandez versus Jordan Leavitt would be a interesting matchup. And I kind of agree. I think that you have a polar opposite in personality. And you've got an extrovert and an introvert. You've got power and finesse. I would love to see that matchup. Be interesting to see how they would line something like that. Jordan Leavitt, who now earns a victory, and Alex Hernandez, who is coming off of defeating Jim Miller, who Jim Miller only has a few fights left in his UFC career, and he has put on many, many, many fights. I was at a Jim Miller bout against Dustin Poirier a few years ago. Great fight. In fact, the low leg kicks of Jim Miller in that matchup really caused Dustin Poirier problems. This was prior to him taking on Justin Gaethje. And that was a close fight. So happy for Jim Miller that he's able to continue on. Happy for Jordan Leavitt here. And let's continue our way through this. Look back at UFC Vegas 70, where we had a last-minute cancellation of the main event. By the way, those who play DFS MMA were thrown a bit of a curveball here. Folks who lost the late swap recently. Now, a couple of cards after that happens, here we are, and the main event gets canceled. So my heart goes out to anybody who was playing DFS MMA. You had Brendan Allen taking on Andre Muniz in the co-main event, but it ended up becoming the main event. So let's continue this journey where we can speak a little bit about Jasmine Jasudavicius and Gabriela Fernandez. Gabriela Fernandez, in the breakdown, we talked about the pre-fight breakdown, that she was very rigid, that she lacked the wrestling and potentially the get-up game. And Jasudavicius really took advantage of that. The female version of GSP, self-proclaimed female version of GSP, caused some issues for Gabriela Fernandez, who had no answer, was caught in a crucifix, I believe a couple of times in there. And depending on the referee, most referees would have stepped in and stopped that bout. She was eating elbow after elbow after elbow. And Jasudavicius gets the victory. The fight does go the distance. The pick was Jasmine Jasudavicius. Gabriela Fernandez, I don't know, man. That was a bad look. It's not like she it looked like she had a decent cut. She was on the scale and looked like she was ready for this, but she just, even on the regional scene, I believe Evan, one of the good guys on Twitter, was posting that the lack of a ground game on behalf of Gabriela Fernandez. So Jasuda Vicious, where does she go? Where does she go from here? Also, that fight, let's look here. That fight took place at 125 pounds. We have a big fight coming up this weekend at 125 pounds in the women's division. We've got Valentina Bullet Shevchenko taking on Alexa Grasso. Really looking forward to that matchup, as well as others. Next, let's get into, my gosh, Trevor Peek, who really burst onto the scene with his first UFC victory here against Erick Gonzalez. This guy has one speed, and it is pedal to the metal in that gear, one gear, and he just goes for it, will not stop moving, will not stop moving forward. It's incredible. He gets taken down, just turns over, gets right back up, makes it look like jiu-jitsu is not a real thing. Gonzalez had his back a couple of times, and the caliber of opponent here could be in play. I mean, Erick Gonzalez, very low level, and Trevor Peek was basically able to walk through him throughout the fight, land bombs, and what was really interesting, Trevor Peek was landing hammer fists at range. When was the last time you saw a fighter do that? It's almost like a stabbing motion, the way he was landing strikes. And then referee made he gave Erick Gonzalez a very long leash towards the end of the round, and that was all she wrote. But Trevor Peek's stock runs up. I believe I read on Twitter that this was only the second time that Bruce Buffer has ever given the card that he reads off of the fighters when he's announcing them to the fighter. And Trevor Peek was one of those fighters. He thinks that he's apparently a special fighter. I don't know who the other fighter was. Be interesting if anybody knows who that other fighter Bruce Buffer gave his intro card to. But Peek showed, again, like he did on the Contender Series matchup, massive holes throughout his game, giving up his back, getting taken down on the feet, overextending, whiffing, hitting air, wasting energy, but that didn't stop him. And Peek, I will say this, he throws hammers, no pun intended, and he goes for it, and he will not stop until the ref intervenes. So this is, I believe, his 9th finish victory for Trevor Peek, and Gonzalez gets finished again. I think that's 3 in a row. Andrea, I do agree with you that the recklessness of Peek is going to get him knocked out. And it isn't going to take an extremely high-level opponent to do that. You just need somebody who has a back-taking ability and can sink in a choke. I think that will be a quick change in the trajectory of Trevor Peek's career. But I'll be interested to see if the odds makers are in tune with that. We'll find out. James, you have a comment here. Bruce is the man, a big moment for Peek, and Bruce made it that much more memorable for him. Great guy. Yes. I wasn't stunned to hear about that. And I'd be interested to hear who you would be interested in as a next prospective opponent for Trevor Peek. Who do you think would be a reasonable opponent? Now that fight, let's see. That fight took place at lightweight at 155 pounds. So how about Jordan Leavitt versus Trevor Peek? Jordan Leavitt has the ability to take the back and lock up a submission. Trevor Peek is a marauder, and I'd like to propose that now. I don't know if Leavitt would take that fight, though, because he is He has a few UFC wins under his belt, and Peak just got his first. But I will mention that after this video ends, I'll tweet it out. I'd like to see Trevor Peak versus Jordan Leavitt. My gosh, what a contrast in style of fighting. Next up, we had Mike Malott taking on Johan Muniz. Johan Muniz came in as a significant underdog here. Mike Malott, he took his time. He didn't take massive risks early. I'll be honest. I had a parlay of Mike Malott and Johan Muniz, the under 2.5 there, tied up with Trevor Peak and Erick Gonzalez under 2.5 at -122, I believe. And that ended up hitting. Also, the Malott Muniz fight doesn't go the distance. We had at -225. I believe that ballooned out to -300 or -325 or so at one point. So locked that in early and paid dividends there, cashing that. Malott showed that Lunez's ground game was not up to snuff. He could not defend the choke. And that was all she wrote. So Muniz goes down in flames. And we have a Canadian victor in the UFC, Mike Malott. Cheers to my Canadian brethren, the Great White North. I heard recently that the UFC will be headed back to Canada sometime in the next few months. So excited about that. I'd contemplate taking the trip up there to watch some fights in Canada. That would be a lot of fun. Take the drive up north. So we'll see. So Mike Malott, I know a lot of folks out there aren't necessarily believers in him, but he is trending in the right direction here. He took some damage, though, against Mickey Gall. So I'm not sure who at 170 pounds would be next for Mike Malott. It'd be interesting to see him take on somebody like Neil Magny. I don't know if Magny would be down for something like that, but I'd like to see that. Let's see. We've got Leavitt would take down Peak fairly quickly. Yeah, I agree. That would be a fun fight. My gosh, can you imagine if he can't get the takedown? So Mike Malott defeats Johan Muniz. Johan Muniz, I like what he brings to the table, though. The guy is a gunslinger, and he'll go for it. And he was tentative early also. Both of these fighters, there was a feeling out process that took place. And sometimes when you have finishers, that's something that happens. And that is dangerous, especially if you're playing the fight doesn't go the distance. If two guys come out and they're gun shy, or they're both coming off of knockout losses, then it can be a sweaty situation. So next up, we have the return of Tatiana Suarez, and she took care of Montana De La Rosa, but it wasn't as easy as folks thought it was going to be. I know it was up a weight class, but let's be honest. I believe that 125 pounds is going to be the weight class that Suarez ends up staying at, unless she can lose that extra 10 pounds. And this is somebody who hadn't been in action for almost 4 years, I believe. 3.5 years or so. Suarez is she's a very strong grappler. The hands aren't there. She cannot strike well. And De La Rosa is not really known for her striking. There were some 50-50 positions during this fight where Suarez really had to fight hard to get the better of De La Rosa. And Suarez did lock up I think it was a guillotine choke that ended up tapping De La Rosa. So happy Suarez gets the victory, but this wasn't the outcome that a lot of people expected. Or maybe, you know what? It was a good bet. Suarez inside the distance and Suarez by submission. I had a hunch that was going to hit. I didn't play it myself. namely because of the knee reconstruction and the neck injuries and back injuries and the time off. But Suarez, inside the distance, cashes for those who played it. And then you have De La Rosa, who she may be on the chopping block here. I mean, you got to cut her some slack, though. Suarez, she's a dominant fighter. It'll be interesting, though, if she can make 115 pounds. We're not talking 116. You got to make championship weight if she's going to fight Weili Zhang for the title. But I'll be interested to see if they end up booking Suarez against De La Rosa. I mean, Suarez against Weili Zhang. That would be fireworks. And you know what? There are a lot of people out there who believe that Suarez would just take down Weili Zhang and maul her. I wonder what kind of lines we would get on that fight. Who do you think would be favored in that matchup? I think that Weili Zhang would probably be lined as the favorite to begin, and that line would probably be bet down by sharps who are in love with Tatiana Suarez's game. So I'll be interested to see if that bout ends up coming to fruition. Let's see. We've got of course, Weili would destroy her on the feet, but the problem is that is in Suarez's game. Suarez would try to get that fight to the mat at all costs. And we even saw Nina Ansaroff 3.5 years ago start to mount a comeback against Tatiana Suarez. So that really took place. So Suarez gets the finish over Montana De La Rosa. And then we have a matchup between Augusto Sakai and Don'Tale Mayes. I remember yesterday I was heavily opinionated in that I cautioned folks not to go to the betting window to bet Don'Tale Mayes if you were having a losing 2023 or you were close to break even. Mayes is one of the least trustworthy fighters on the UFC roster. Unfortunately, he exhibits some of the lowest level fight IQ the sport has ever seen. And he was at it again yesterday against Augusto Sakai, a fighter who had been knocked out in 4 consecutive bouts. Somebody who his chin basically was on a platter for Mayes, but Mayes decided to come out and I don't know what the heck he was doing out there, to be honest. He was letting Sakai get the clinch on him, push him against the fence, he was getting kneed in the face, had no idea. It seemed like he had no idea how to get out of the clinch, could not break off. This was the fight where Dom Cruz was saying that it comes down to technique. And just because you're a heavyweight does not mean that you cannot learn the technique to break away from the fence in the clinch. And Sakai was getting the better of the grappling exchanges. He was getting better at the stand-up. This was a stay-away fight for me, but it just boggled my mind to see folks on the timeline who were backing Don'Tale Mayes. That made no sense to me whatsoever, unless you thought that he was going to tee off on Sakai. And you can't trust what Don'Tale Mayes is going to bring to the table each and every fight. So Mayes probably gets the chopping block here. I think that's the last we see of him in the UFC, so you'll be unable to fade him in the future. And Sakai gets a victory, much needed. I mean, the guy had been knocked out 4 consecutive times, is now back in the win column, and I'm happy for him. Very happy for Augusto Sakai. You saw in the post-fight interview how much that victory meant to him, and he walks home with the victory. So good on you, Augusto Sakai. And where does he go from here? You know, who? Maybe Romanov? Romanov's got a big fight coming up, though, next week. The heavyweight roster in the UFC is so incredibly thin. And then you have the men's bantamweight division, the best division in the sport, that is busting at the seams with talent. I am man, it's hard for me to contain my emotions here because bantamweight is incredible, incredible. We've got a number of bantamweight bouts coming up in the near future, high level bantamweight bouts in the near future. So, looking forward to those. Now, let's chat a little bit about the main event of the evening where we had Andre Muniz and Brendan Allen locking horns. This was a fight that took the place of Krylov versus Spann. By the way, that would have been a great fight. It's being bumped to the March 11th card. So that card ends up getting a big boost. I know that's the Jan Marab card also. So Brendan Allen shows us another level to his game. I never really doubted Allen. He was the pick in this spot. Muniz, great grappler in his own right, but we've seen him run out of gas down the stretch in a number of bouts, and man, he seemed tired. He didn't have an answer for Brendan Allen's striking, and then we saw the tremendously decorated Andre Muniz get submitted via rear naked choke by Brendan Allen. That was a beautiful thing to watch. Happy for Brendan Allen. One thing that comes to mind every time I think of Brendan Allen is the Sean Strickland loss and also the Chris Curtis loss. How much that much burn at him. I would love to see a rematch of either of those. I know he would be down to get both of those fights back, especially the Strickland fight. So Allen's climbing the ladder here. He is back on his horse, and he has a bright future. This is a fighter who's still in his mid-20s, so it's not like he's an old war horse, but he does have a lot of experience under his belt, Brendan Allen. So excited to find out where Brendan Allen goes from here. So great victory. And Muniz, his stock falls dramatically. Can't really that division, the middleweight division, is not very stacked. So I'll be interested to see who Muniz gets matched up with. Somebody maybe like Jotko or somebody of that sort. But we'll see what ends up happening with that. And then Brendan Allen, I mean, he finds himself I'd say 3 fights away from a title shot if he ends up rattling off some victories. But we've seen Allen, sometimes he can be his own worst enemy. He takes fights to places where he doesn't necessarily need to go. And his fight against Malkoun ends up gaining a little bit of shine there. We've seen how good Malkoun is. So to pull out that fight and then get back here with this victory over Muniz, the arrow is pointed up for Brendan Allen. So I'm excited about him. Want to thank everybody for tuning in today, taking a quick look back at UFC Vegas 70. This performance at the latest card bumped me up over 118 units now. We are hitting at 15% ROI in 2023. We have a bright future ahead of us. Put a number of, in fact, the majority of my content this year so far has been free, and looking forward to UFC 285. My goodness gracious. I'll say it again. Goodness gracious. You talk about matchups that are on the fridge. There could be some of them. Thank you, James. There are some matchups on the fridge. We've got a main event between Cyril Gane and John Jones. We also have a number of matchups. Derek Brunson taking on Duplessis. We've got a hell of a card. Some firework matchups. Shavkat Rakhmonov. Shavkat Rakhmonov taking on Neil. Jeff Neal. Man, there's going to be so many great fights ahead. So looking forward to it. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you. If you wouldn't mind, you could like and subscribe to the channel. I believe only at around 300 or so followers here or subscribers. I have well over 8,000 Twitter followers and been putting out some content on this channel on a regular basis. And the key here is it's not about the likes or the subscribers. It's about the quality of the content that goes out. You want to be able to tune in to folks who are producing profitable advice and steering folks in the right direction. I can't stress that enough. If you are listening, there are choices you have out there, and I recommend tuning into folks who steer you in the right direction on a regular basis. So looking forward to a bright future ahead, and I appreciate you. So it's about quality, not quantity. Have a great day.